Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and earn even more money. All in one place, and it's for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup looks like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. Best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since we discovered Spotify for Podcasters, we feel like having options like video podcasts, Q&A, and polls has let us be creative on a whole other level. I highly recommend you give it a try. So download Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Welcome to the X's and T podcast, where we talk about X's and T with your host, Corey
and Danny. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome.
It's always a good welcome.
It is.
10 out of 10.
Warm and fuzzy.
Warm, especially.
Yes.
So we're really, really excited. As always. I mean, I think I say that every single time. So one day
we actually mean it though.
Yeah, one
We're
time.
not just bullshitting you.
One day we'll come and say something completely different. But that's probably not going to happen for a while. But today, you guys, we're so excited. I'm so happy with how many people have reached out to us to speak and want to take advantage of our speak out session.
Yeah, it's been amazing.
I'm really excited too that I didn't realize how many people have experienced what I did when I was in Worldwide.
Literally, there's been so many like DMs, especially on like Instagram and stuff,
where people are just like,
hey, I've been a part of this.
Yeah. And you don't realize how many people experience the same things until you talk to as many people as we have in just a short period of time. Because I think maybe only a month ago we started talking about it.
Yeah.
So we're really excited because not only do we have a special guest, this is our first international guest. This person's coming to us all the way from Canada, which I know is not super, super far, but like it's far to us.
Yeah.
That's like a whole foreign country to us.
Right. It's amazing that our podcast has traveled that far.
Yeah.
Somebody else has heard it, not just in Arizona.
Right. And not just in Oregon too.
Right.
That's where a lot of our people are from.
Exactly.
But we're really excited because this person has so much to talk about. And it's wild just how many people have experienced the same thing. So everybody we're here to introduce our friend Hope. Hi, Hope.
Hello.
So Hope is here with us today because, as we mentioned, like so many people have experienced the toxicity of Worldwide Dream Builders.
Way too many.
So Hope, how did you find our podcast?
I am in a Amway / Worldwide Dream Builders group on Facebook that I found through Z and Melody on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I just started looking them up and then found this group and I was like, oh, this is so interesting. Like there's hundreds of members. So, and then you posted your podcast in there and I was like, oh, that's so interesting. And I listened to all the Worldwide stuff. Good.
Shout out really quick. We have a very faithful listener. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that this guy has a sock puppet account in that same group. Shout out Craig. We know you're there. We know you're listening.
I love it.
Thank you so much for being a supporter, giving us another listen because we need to be speaking out against Worldwide and more people are wanting to come forward. And even in the US, people have experienced this, and apparently in Canada too.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am born and raised in Edmonton, Alberta. I live in Leduc. Yeah. I live in Leduc now, which is just about like 20 minutes south. So basically like right in the city. Yeah, I've been living here since I was 13. Yeah, I'm going to get right into how I met my upline because it was my stepmom's best friend, like not best friend, but like they worked together at like a different place. Her name was Carol and we worked together waitressing at a bar. And she came to me one day and was like, why do you keep asking about my business? Why do you keep asking about it? And I was like, I don't know. I see all these vitamins and stuff. I don't know what this is. I like health. Like, I was like, oh, I don't know. I think I like the human body. Like I was kind of interested in it. And she's like, oh, well, I met this wealthy couple that retired in their 20s. And I was like, what? Like, you need to tell me all about this, like right now.
Right.
And then she just said like, well, no, it's something that's earned and we got to go through a process and you got to meet some people. And
Right.
that's kind of how I got introduced. Me and my boyfriend, now husband, went to this little meeting with her. And I remember Googling like right after, I was like, is network marketing a pyramid scheme?
Right.
Like literally like right after. Because that's all she kept saying was network marketing, network marketing. And I was
Right.
like, I've never heard of something like this before. So
Right. Wow. So it's somebody kind of right within your backyard. That's wild.
yeah.
That's kind of how I got
Somebody
into
so
this too.
trustworthy too. Like somebody that was like good friends with my stepmom. I was like, oh, I trust this person.
Yeah,
Like, I'm
they're not
gonna
going to
listen
steer
to
you
her.
wrong, right?
Yeah, and she's like 10 years older than me. Like I was like super interested. I was like 19. So
Yeah.
somebody I thought was smart.
Right. And you think you can trust them and you're like, yeah, of course I want to hear about this business. Like that sounds
Yeah.
really cool. So when you were going through this process, right? I know in our other episodes we've mentioned the process, right? The process, that's a interview process that people go through to eventually be quote offered a partnership
Yeah.
business. Which real fast, we just want to make a disclaimer that we are in no way affiliated with the Worldwide Dream Builders anymore. Amway is just a distribution company. Nothing that we've learned is from Amway. Everything is from Worldwide Dream Builders. And we have changed everybody's names as we do because we ain't trying to get sued, but we also don't want to glorify anybody. And honestly, if you know, you'll know exactly who we're talking about.
Yeah.
So with that, how many meetings did you go to before you found out the distribution company?
I don't even remember. I think I might have found out in my launch.
Really?
Like, yeah, it was like super late. Like
Oh,
I remember
wow.
just being like totally invested and then finding out I was like, what's Amway?
Right.
Like they're like, oh, this is the thing you're signing up for. And I was like, oh,
They are not transparent about it at all. Like
not at
they
all.
really, and they groom you into it. They get you all hyped up and excited about this mentorship and the idea of retiring at a young age.
Yeah.
And then after you're like super excited about it, you finally hear this is Amway. And as the younger generation, I know I had never heard of Amway beforehand. It wasn't until my dad told me the story about a guy named that he called Amway Al. And and that's crazy.
Yeah.
I've always heard of it as Scamway.
Oh, I got your back. That's alleged, by the way. That's just what we call it. It's our nickname for it. So
yeah, me
don't
too.
sue us. Did you learn that it was Worldwide Dream Builders before you learned about Amway?
I think so. Yeah, I think I went to Dream Night and that's when they kind of were like, oh, it's Worldwide Dream Builders. And I was like, okay, that's like one of the names. Because it was like right around Christmas time. So it was like they have like a Christmas break kind of.
Yeah.
And it was like right into Dream Night after that. And that was like my first real look at a bigger function. And that's when they were like, yeah, it's Worldwide Dream Builders. I don't even think they said Amway there though, like at all.
Right. That's
So weird.
wild.
Yeah.
So what year was it when you found out? I know you said you were 19, but what year was that?
2015, around Christmas 2015. So going into 2016. That's right around the time. Yeah.
So just a few months before I had actually started. So we're kind of talking around the same time frame here.
Yeah.
So when you do you remember what your first initial like thought process was when you saw your first board plan?
I remember we were like super nervous at first, me and my husband, because we thought it was just going to be like these big leagues interviewing us in like this apartment. And then when we like showed up and there was like a bunch of people in suits in like this tiny apartment in the middle of December, like it was so weird. We're like, oh, okay, like we're not being interrogated. Like that's what we assumed was going to happen, is they were just going to question us a whole bunch. But I remember being like watching Nolan write on the board and be like, this guy talks really fast.
Oh my God, they do.
Really nice suit. And especially when they were going through like the products and stuff, he would like literally like say Amway, but it was like so fast. Like he would not even like, he's like, and then he would just like write out, oh, you need this much to make this much. Like, but they had so much awareness around like toxic work culture. So like, that's kind of what drew me in, was being like, oh, like, yeah, I don't want to work in the workforce. Like, it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like, and they made me like question my job and like question all these things. And that's kind of like how I was like, wow, like these people are questioning the norm. Like, I'm really glad about that. So that's kind of what drew me in like almost immediately, is I was like, wow, like we do need to question these things that are so normal. But
yeah. Oh, absolutely. In fact, I had a job recently that, oh my gosh, that if I would have been working this specific job, I mean, I was already sucked in, but this job had every negative characteristic that these leaders were preaching, right? They're like, you have to ask to go to the bathroom. They micromanage you like crazy. It's a toxic work environment. Like, you're right. They do. But they need you to hear all these things. They need you to relate in some way.
Yeah.
Did your board plans look like this? We'll post a picture of it.
Yeah, like almost exactly. Like that's the napkin plan, right?
Yeah.
I got the napkin plan in my first meet and greet.
And this one?
Oh man. Yeah.
Am I bringing it back?
Yeah.
I drew this out for Corey to show her what it was like.
Yeah. It's like it's completely accurate. Even here in Canada, it was exactly the same. Like nothing changed.
Right. Duplication really does run thick. And that's what's sad about how we're all connected as far as leaving, is that you kind of hope that maybe you're one of a few people who've had this experience, and you don't realize that almost every person who is leaving has experienced very similar things. We've had people reach out to us. We had someone reach out to us who had left kind of recently. And that person had mentioned like marital problems. Their upline was not helping them with their marital problems. And then they left, and then they are now parting ways from their significant other because they were kind of pressured into the marriage aspect. But I know all of that kind of comes later.
Oh yeah.
So if you could like kind of briefly explain what was how long were you involved?
5 years.
5 years. Oh my gosh. Okay. So you probably have so much perspective. What was that first year like, kind of going from through the process to your launch, and then from your launch to maybe your kind of launch anniversary?
So the weird thing is that we didn't have enough money to launch right away. So it's like, everything is in USD, which is like, I don't know, $1 million Canadian dollars. Like it's the conversions, like it's pretty high. So it was like $800 for us to launch. Right? Gosh. So, and we had to launch separately, me and my husband, because we weren't married at the time. We didn't live together or anything. So they had us like still in the process for like a long time.
Okay.
So when my husband launched, I remember being like, can I just launch with him? Like, I don't get it.
Right.
And then they were like, absolutely not. So then he went and launched, and then it took me still like 2 months after, because I was waitressing.
Right.
And like my paychecks were like not even $500. Like it was all tips. So
wow.
They were like, they were gonna take away board plans. Like they were like, you're not launching fast enough. Like we need you to get into the business super fast. I remember that being like, yeah, it was a super big red flag. I didn't tell you guys that on our little
wow. Because I was thinking, like, as you're explaining this, my friend Jess, who had come on and spoke with us, she had experienced something very similar. Her and her, well, now ex-husband, but when they were just dating, right? She was always like, why can't we just launch together? I don't understand. We live together. We do everything as if we're married. What's the difference? And we now understand that kind of like the circles, right? Is that they need that individual 200 PV. Because is that what it was for you guys, 200 PV?
Yeah, it was 150. So it's like 100 of our own and then 50 custer.
I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Oh my God. We had to do
Canadian dollars, man. Like those Canadian dollars are so much.
Oh, I bet. Plus, did you guys have to pay for any sort of like customs and things like that for things to be shipped?
No, that was all good. There used to be like product pickup years ago, but we didn't have that. It just delivered like straight to our door. So
got it.
Yeah, we didn't have to worry about that, but yeah, they almost like completely cut me. So that was like not cool. I remember like crying to my husband and being like, why are they doing this? This seems suspicious. Like, why are they trying to like make me shovel out all this money? And then be like, oh, it's actually not about the mentorship. It's about the fact that you aren't launching.
Right.
Like super weird. That was, super
sus. That's sad. I mean, even over here, like Jess was in like, quote, in the process for almost for over a year was she in the process until she finally got married. She didn't end up launching her own business because like you, she's like, I can't afford this.
Yeah.
She was doing, I think, caregiving at the time. She was living with her significant other. And I mean, they let her go to board plans, but they definitely talked behind her back all the time. And it's kind of devastating to think about that because these people are like, we're your best friends. We have your best interest, but yet they're putting you in debt.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was like, I did end up getting the money for it. And I think it was like, we got our offer in February and I didn't launch until June. So it was like a while, definitely, that I was like, just kind of sitting and, you know, still going to functions for free as a guest. That was pretty nice. But
oh, that's right. Did you go to Spring Leadership then just before you launched?
I think so. Yeah. I think Spring Leadership was free for the both of us. That was first, like, other than Dream Night, that was like our first major function.
So
yeah.
Wow. So where is your guys' Spring Leadership held? Is it
Calgary?
How far is that from where you are?
3 hours south. It's
so
not
still a distance.
bad. Yeah, but our family reunion was in Spokane.
Oh shit! So you came over to the US for Spokane
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and
that's where our Spring Leadership was in Spokane.
Yeah, well, maybe we crossed paths.
There's a good possibility, which is crazy because I had finally quit in 2019. But our Spring Leaderships for my first 2 years were out in Spokane. And then the year that I left, our Spring Leadership finally came down and they had it at the Moda Center in Portland.
Oh man. Yeah, for family reunion, it was the last year they had it in 2016 in Spokane for our leadership, and then Don and Mary got their own family reunion, so then it moved to Calgary here again. But everything, 2 of them were in Calgary, family reunion and Spring Leadership, and then FED was in Red Deer. Red Deer is closer, so
right. Wow. Okay, so that first year then you're kind of just living on top of the world basically, right? As soon as you launch.
Oh man,
how you felt?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was so invested. I like told all my bosses about it. I would give like sass mouth to my bosses. I was like, I don't care if you fire me. Like I have this big business. Like I'm going to be a millionaire one day. Like just a sassy little 20-year-old. Like, oh my gosh.
They made us so pompous. Am I right?
Man, yeah, absolutely. Like I was just like, you know, I would like ask my dad, I was like, what kind of boat do you want? I was like, I'll buy you a boat one day. Like,
oh man. Were your parents supportive?
My dad, absolutely not. He was like, literally when I told him I was going through Carol's process, he was like, that's a pyramid scheme. And I was like, what's a pyramid scheme? You never taught me, like, you know.
Right. We're not taught what pyramid schemes are until we get involved, right?
Yeah. But it's like, why am I going to take your advice? You're divorced, you know, you got this. Like they taught us like so much.
Yes.
Like,
they really did. My dad was so against it too. Like we would get into arguments about it.
The best part is like my dad, he was pretty against it for a while. Like keep trying to convince us. Like he used to yell in the living room and he'd be like, freedom. My dad, don't they say that to you? And I'm like, oh my gosh, my dad knows exactly what's happening here. Like that's kind of weird. Yeah. And then throughout the years that we were kind of in it, my dad just kind of was like, I know, like, I don't agree with what you're doing, but you're becoming better people. And he's like, I could see like that you were growing as people.
Oh,
so
okay.
He was really happy about that. Like, he was like, you guys are really taking this seriously and you're learning this leadership and stuff. Even now, since we quit, he's like, don't regret it because you are better people coming out of it.
Oh, wow.
Like, yeah.
That's
so like,
amazing.
So he wasn't supportive of like the whole Amway thing, but he definitely was like the mentorship part. He was like, yeah, this is good. And my mom did go through the process. So.
Oh, really?
That was good. Yeah. She came to a lot and she like cried at FED. Remember that?
Oh, was it your first FED that she went?
It was my first.
And that's when Nolan and Rianne, that's when they first crossed as diamonds, right? From
Canada? Yep. Yeah, that's when they were first diamonds, and we were like crying because like they brought their children on stage and stuff because like, and we knew their kids.
Right.
Like, Rianne was pregnant most of our first, like when we were launching and stuff like that, and then like to bring her little baby on stage, it was all like super emotional and.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
So this is again, a crazy, even different perspective, because I was so far removed from the upline that I had that would end up going diamond, right? Taylor and his wife. But I don't remember the nickname we gave his wife, to be honest. Kylie, maybe? I don't know. Taylor, everyone knows. Right. Yeah. Taylor, the nightclub owner. So if you know, you know. Yeah. But I was so far removed from them. But you were in like the back pocket of these like emeralds who were literally going diamond.
Yeah.
Wow. What was that like?
It definitely got us real good. I'll say that. Like it got us like real hooked real fast, because we were like, oh, these people are like really actually rich. Like we saw Nolan's watches and, you know, Rianne's clothes, and we saw like their cars and their house, and like we've been over there, and you know, we used to Kate them all the time, like whenever we needed to. And it was like super weird because they were so big, and we were like, oh, we know those people, we like chat with them, but now they're on this massive stage, and like, you know what I mean? Like, right, it's so weird to know them personally. Like,
oh, I bet. I mean, the people, my leadership, like Taylor's wife, like when I remember when my upline Jenny and Craig went Eagle, and then like Jenny ended up having like lunch with Taylor's wife, and that was like a huge deal. It was like, these are royalty, these are people that you're excited to move forward. And I remember saying that in my first function. My first function was family reunion of 2016. And I remember saying, like, what other arena, if you will, or environment do you want your friends to become your CEO or something like that? Because you're so excited, right, for them to move forward. Yeah. But that's still crazy, because I remember looking at Nolan and Rianne and thinking, oh my gosh, they are huge. Those people are like absolute royalty to me. I would kill to meet them. And I think so. Nolan and Rianne, right? I think she was a nurse, right?
Yeah. Nurse, singer, all that fun stuff, all at the same time. Wow. And she got to retire at 25. I remember that being like a big thing, because it only took a year or something for her to retire, and then 2 more years, I think, for Nolan to retire.
Wow. That probably was really good information. You're like, that's gonna be me.
Yeah, literally. That's exactly what I thought, because I was like 19, 20. Like, it was crazy.
Yeah, who doesn't want to retire early?
Seriously.
Yeah. Like now I'm 26. I'm like, I was supposed to be retired last year. Right. It just sucks.
Right. I can relate. I've definitely had that thought too. And Nolan, he was a
personal trainer, but he was like almost in the NHL.
Okay. Hockey player, right?
Yeah. Hockey player. He would fight everybody in the hockey arena. I remember that.
So, okay, now kind of thinking about the weather, where when it was winter time, did you also experience your upline pressuring you despite the fact that it was like below zero and like terrible roads?
Yeah, so funny, because like I have a big fear of driving in the snow, like
that's massively.
Fair. Ironically, like there's snow literally like 7 months of the year here. So it's like to have a fear of snow driving, like, is just a dumb fear. But basically they would try to shame you for that reason. Like, they're like, you're from Alberta. Like, just
really?
drive. Yeah. Wow. Like, oh, and like, this is something spicy that happened too.
Spicy.
My friend actually passed away in October of 2016. So like still fresh in the business.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, and it was Nolan and Rianne's first open on the day of her funeral.
Stop.
And I remember being like, I'm not going. And they were like, yeah, like, it's okay. Like, you don't have to go. But then they were like, it was so good. Like, it was like really good. Just so you know, like, it was so good.
Wow.
Like, and they just like totally tried to shame you. And then Carol, my main upline, had to do an incentive for me. And I was like during this time, she's like, I've noticed you're kind of falling off. I noticed that you're like not really all in right now. So this is what I want you to do, is like talk to somebody for 30 days and send me a Kate. And so I remember Kating her back and being like, I'm not going to do that. My friend just died.
Wow.
And then I didn't hear back from her. Like, it was like, she didn't say anything. So I was like, no, I'm not doing it.
That is devastating, but that honestly doesn't surprise me. I mean, honestly, like, I'm so sorry to hear about your friend, and honestly, our condolences, because that's tough. I mean, if even like they would really say this kind of stuff though. I remember like the main guy who like founded Worldwide, honestly, I don't have a name for his wife, but like, you know who I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
When they talked about their son passing away, how they would still go to board plans even while he was in the hospital. And there were other upline like diamonds who were saying the same things. Like, it's one thing to say, you know, well, I'd rather miss my best friend's wedding that I'm supposed to be in, right? It's one thing to say that, sure. But when you're talking about a funeral and you're talking about people passing away and like needing the time to grieve, they did not give that.
Yeah, not at all. And she passed away in a car accident, like because of the weather. So then after that, they were like, we would go to board plans and they would say like, it doesn't matter the weather, you're still going to drive. And at this time I'm like still nervous to drive because I'm like, I just lost my friend.
Yeah.
So
I mean, like say for example, like Corey passed away. I'm a mess for an entire year. Like,
yeah.
I'm not leaving my house. Like,
yeah, absolutely. It was hard for sure.
I hate that. And I hate that. I mean, your boss gives you enough grief, right? At work.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have like, especially if you have like a toxic boss, I mean, shout out to all the great bosses out there who are super supportive and understanding of like deaths and things like that. But I've also had supervisors who were like not compassionate.
Oh yeah. I got written up at the same time for missing work, like literally for my same friend's funeral. And it was not really like a write-up. They would give you like points.
Oh, okay.
And they like went to give me a point. I was like, I'm not signing the sheet. And they're like, but you missed a shift. And I was like, I didn't choose for my friend to die.
Yeah.
And then they were like, oh, we didn't know that. And I was like, how did you not know that? Like it was a crazy time. And then Worldwide not giving me the benefit of the doubt either. Like that sucked. Like it was.
I bet.
Yeah.
Because at least your work is paying you, right? At least they I don't want to say they have a reason, but I could understand a greedy ass boss being like, hey, this sucks. But these people, right, who are claiming to be your best friends, your quote, best friends for life, you're going to travel the beaches of the world with them, right?
Yeah.
Are not allowing you this opportunity to heal yourself.
Yeah. Because I'm not making the money. Exactly. That's the thing. Like I wasn't making the money by going out and building my business, which inevitably builds theirs.
Oh yeah.
So it was like I could see that that's what was happening. As I was like, oh, like first me not launching and them trying to be like, you either launch or you're out, or and this whole like funeral. That was like my first year. I don't know how I didn't jump out, but I was like really wanted to be rich. So like,
oh, I bet. And you know what? Now that I'm like thinking about it, because I remember listening to the Canadian leaders and thinking that they are ruthless. So Dawn and Mary are Nolan and Rianne's upline diamond. Like they're upline, they're like direct, right?
Well, not direct, because
not direct. There's people
Rianne's
in between.
brother.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So, but they passed their brother.
Right.
So that's why I was like, oh, you can pass people. That's exciting.
Right.
But yeah, Dawn and Mary were very interesting. They were also very ruthless people. I remember that. They ended up getting their own family reunion when I was in, which was pretty interesting. That was like an exciting time. I remember because I was like, I don't have to go to Spokane. I don't have to use my passport anymore.
Oh, right. I can imagine. That's it. Did you drive or fly?
We used a bus. Okay. We left at 11 p.m. and we got there like 7 a.m. and we busted, all of us. It was not a good time. Wow. My poor husband slept on the floor. My husband's 6'6". And he let to lay on the ground like he's gonna fit. Like it was not a good time. I remember that not being a good time at all.
Wow. Yeah. That doesn't surprise me though, because they always try to cut corners with things, with how much they're like, they want you to spend all this money, but they're always so cheap about things.
Yeah.
And we would drive up to Spokane too, which from Portland is about a 5-hour drive ish. Yeah. And my first time was fun because it was just my upline. They weren't Eagles yet, but it was my upline. My upline back then was so dope. I loved them. They were all around my age, super awesome. We had a fun time. And my son would come with us because my sister lives in Pasco, which is on the way to Spokane, and she would watch my son for those weekends.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
But my second spring leadership was horrible.
Oh man.
This is when that
one girl,
that psycho girl.
Bitch.
Yeah, the psycho girl that I freaking hated. Like, her boyfriend is cool. We still talk on Snapchat every once in a while, and he's not in the business anymore. But that girl that they like ended up breaking up. She made the whole trip miserable. And I'm sure you can relate that there were some people who were like,
There was, definitely some people like we had through the process and launched like that. I was like, oh, we should have never done that. These are not good people. Like,
right.
I remember cutting a guy, and this is like all my call because he was like, I'm not going to FED. My stomach's sore. And I was like, okay, I'm done with you now. I was like, just did not even give him the benefit of the doubt.
But that's how you're taught to be. They teach you if you're like, if like they would say, if they have to work that weekend and they don't call out of work to come to this, they're not dedicated.
Yeah. Oh, I got fired from a job too for spring leadership.
Really?
It was a mandatory weekend, and they were like, you need to go to work. And I was like, I'm not going. And they were like, well, you need to, you're going to get fired. And I was like, I'm still not going to go.
Wow.
And then I didn't show up, and they like called me a million times, and then I wasn't on the schedule anymore.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So what was that like?
That was honestly a very toxic job.
Oh, so you're okay with
all
it.
in all, like I was like, I'm good to be done with this place anyway.
Yeah.
So a couple weeks before, the boss like yelled in my face, and I was like, don't yell. We can talk. Like, we can just have a conversation. So I was like,
oh, right.
I was like kind of done with it, and it was the perfect weekend to screw them over.
Oh, sure.
So I was like, I'm okay to not be here anymore. So but that's where I met my upline too, was at that job. So
got it.
Yeah, I was okay with being done.
Yeah. Wow.
Wow. Okay. So you're going through your first year of business, and then you're kind of entering your second year. What was that second year like?
The second year was my honeymoon stage. That's when I like really like had a great time. Like I was like, this is so good. I think I got a really good waitressing job in November of 2016. And I was like, I love this job. It's so good. And it was like literally like 5 minutes down the road, and it was like mad money. And that was really good. And they were completely understanding about time off.
Yeah.
So like I could make it to every plan. I think that's when we took the most people through the process and made an incentive. So it was like our first incentive ever, that we got to go to Dawn and Mary's house. And that was like really exciting. And then we had to do like a treasure hunt in Leduc, which was interesting. Like it was a fun time. We had a really fun time. That second year was probably my favorite year ever. But we also took a vacation. So when we took a vacation, they were not happy.
Oh yeah, I bet. How dare you spend money?
Yeah. It was not even like the money. Like we were like, gonna drive down to Waterton, which is only like a 5-hour drive. It's right on the border between Montana and BC. So it's like right in the corner of Alberta. And it's one of the nicest places like I've ever been in my life. And then we're gonna go to Drumheller and then to Calgary, because we're gonna go to family reunion like right after. And we're like, it'll only be a couple of days. Like we'll just go, and then we're going straight into a major function. So we're not gonna lose focus.
Right.
Like that was our mindset. And they still were kind of like, I don't know. Nolan would always say, he's like, I took a 2-week vacation and put me back 6 months. And I was like, it was so bad. There was so much of life. Like, I don't think I've even been on a vacation since because of that. Like, not only because of that, but also the pandemic. So that didn't help. But it was, they didn't really say much to me, but they definitely hinted at it.
Oh, sure. They're always passive aggressive with how they say things. It's always like, you'll wait till you go diamond, then you'll go on vacation.
Yeah. And they're like, and then the vacations will be paid for.
Yep. Like your one vacation is going to be because Amway paid for it.
Yeah. But how did they even like, that was the thing they would always preach. They were like, oh, you're going to have so much vacations. You're going to have so much time, but they don't have time.
They don't.
They would always say they did, but they didn't have any time. Like, I remember them talking about one of the double diamonds that was just above Dawn and Mary. And she was a single, and she would do 100 Kates a day. Like, how do you have time for that?
Yeah, you don't have time to, like they say, they lounge around and stuff, but they don't. Between all of the board plans that they have. And I'm sure at some point they still have council sessions, maybe like not the top people, like the crowns, if you know.
Yeah.
I'm sure they probably don't do them anymore, but I would imagine that even like diamonds, they do council sessions with their emeralds, with their platinum legs.
Yeah. Well, I remember thinking, I was like, I might just stop at emerald because emeralds just seems like beautiful.
I thought that too.
Like, I was like, oh, you don't have to do rallies, you don't have to do opens, you don't have to do like all of these crazy things, and you're still making like almost $1 million a year. Like, emerald sounds great.
Yeah.
I just want to sit at emerald.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they glorified diamonds so much.
They really did, because they would have like, I remember dream night being like, they would say, and it was such bullshit. They would say that dream night's the only night that they get to brag, which is not true.
Oh man. I remember
every major function they did.
You know, I remember Nolan and Rianne's like joke would always be like, it's hump day, like ew, and we would be like, ew, why are you talking about that? And they were like, we got 4 kids under 5, and they would like say we have a lot of time, and like that was their thing.
Ew, that sounds like yes, yes, the emerald leg underneath Taylor and his wife, he's from Syria. So if you know, you know, but he would talk so much about sexual things, and it would make me uncomfortable, because I understand like you're trying to make it funny, but he would go so far in depth that it was like I'd be sitting there like, dude, shut up, like,
oh man.
And he's like, you can't call HR because I am HR, like that's my business, is how they would say it. And he would be like, yeah, you know, you have the rule where you don't wear clothes inside the house, or like we have, they would do the same thing all the time, and it was just so uncomfortable for him to talk like that.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Like that as like, and your business partners.
Yeah.
These are your board plan too. This is like a first look. He's talking like this.
Yeah. Yikes. That is so weird. That's inappropriate. No, it was definitely like, and the weird part is like one of the cardinal rules is don't mess with anybody's spouse. Yeah. So it's like they like talk about and they're like, oh, this is not, it's kind of gross. Like you're imagining that. Like you can't help but imagine that.
Because they drill it into your head at almost they make the same jokes, they make the same like references at every man.
And the fake laughing too. I remember my first board plan, I didn't say this before, but I remember this like couple in the front was like, yeah, and they were like clapping, and I was like, this is so weird, there's like 10 of us here.
Yeah.
Why are you like, he can hear you just have to say yes, like nod your head. Like,
oh yeah. Did you so you probably found then later at the nuts and bolts, they're telling you need to laugh. I remember Taylor's wife would say this to us. She'd be like, I don't care if Taylor's made the same joke over and over and over again about X, Y, and Z. You laugh like you've never heard it before.
Oh man. Mine was on the bus back from the first family reunion. Like we were all like sitting there. Yeah. And John, one of our main uplines, he was like, kind of our eagle / like I think they went silver at some point and then they like fell out, but
got it.
They would basically say if Nolan's not like making jokes and like, you know, he's not having a good time, so like as an audience we have to participate.
Yes, you have to hype them up.
Like you have to hype them up or they're not going to be in the zone. So weird.
I remember being talked to after one of our board plans, after all the guests had left. My upline Eagles, they went ruby. They were sponsored by their son, and their son was directly sponsored underneath the Syrian guy. So their son, right, would hold. I remember one time he held us all after, right? Somebody at this board plan wrote the word Amway in the dirt. Someone wrote Amway sucks, and he assumed it was an IBO. Who did that? So he held us all back. He's like, I did not like your energy. Whoever wrote that, you better never do that. I better not catch who you are. Like he would be so pompous, as if like you, like if we didn't laugh enough, if we weren't like hyping them up, clapping, being loud, if that was not happening, he was holding us after and saying like, you guys need to do better. You have to have more energy because these guests are like everyone who brought a guest is depending on you.
Oh yeah, that was a big thing. Yeah, I remember that. Because my husband and me have ADHD. So board plans became like hella redundant. And like,
oh, I bet.
So we would like be there, like losing our dopamine, being like, and man, we would just do things and say things to each other like that would just make the other one laugh. like throughout the whole plan. And it was like, it wasn't great, but you could tell like that we're trying not to laugh. And you know, like when you get in that mood when you're like trying not to laugh and like, you know, you're not supposed to laugh. Like we would be like so bad for that, but we were like, they like kind of gave us the benefit of the doubt because we were so young, but they were like, oh, they're just kids, like just little teenagers. But I remember one time we didn't do that. We were like really invested, like trying to, you know, and John and Jane, who ended up becoming our main upline, they cated us after and we're like, we could see your maturity, we could see how much you've grown. And it was like, because we weren't laughing through the whole board plan, like it was so funny. Like, yeah. Oh yeah, and that first year too, I also, or second year, I guess, I lost my one of my uplines. So Carol was married to James and they ended up getting divorced.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it ended up just being Carol. So I still had to like copy her into the Kates.
Sure.
So you can like copy all your upline.
Yeah.
Nobody knows that, but it ended up being John and Jane who had to take over because we were a couple.
Right.
And yeah, she was just a single woman. So if I had single women going through the process, it still didn't matter. It was still Jane that had to take over. And then Carol just kind of like fell off. And then we could be like more friends at that point. Like she was still my upline, but it was like a lot more casual than it was with like John and Jane. So, and that's when things got like really crazy because we wanted them to drive depth with us, but we were like, but it just happened inevitably.
Got it.
Like, it wasn't something that was planned, if that makes sense. And that's where things got like really suspicious on my end.
Really?
That way. Yeah. Because they're like ultra religious. I don't know if you've talked about like how religious that is.
So I actually haven't really been given the opportunity to kind of get into that. So I'm really glad that you brought that up because I'm like, as you're like talking about things, I'm remembering so much more, especially when we had our conversation before this. There's so much that I think I definitely forgot to mention. And just real fast. So driving depth, what that means is that your upline, like Eagles and rubies and platinums, I'm sorry. So your Eagles, rubies, and platinums are focused on your leg. They are doing meetings specifically for your leg of business with the intention of growing your business. They basically point you out and they say, hey, I see you doing more than everybody else in my business. I'm going to drive depth in your leg.
Yeah.
And they would push that too. They would be like, so-and-so's looking for another leg to drive depth in.
Yeah.
They call it tap rooting.
Tap rooting. That's in the
But yes, so the religious aspect, absolutely. Worldwide was incredibly religious, and
though they claim not to be, which was the funniest part.
They really would.
Like, they would be like, this is my faith and I can talk about it as a private event. Like I remember them being like, this is a private event, like the government's not paying me to be here.
Yes.
And it was like, I can talk about my faith. And it was like, I don't care about your faith. Your faith can be a frog and whatever. Like I remember them saying that like all the time.
Yeah.
But they would talk about it like for sure.
They would claim to be diverse and inclusive, but they by no means were diverse and inclusive. I remember by the end, most of our the downline from our rubies down, everybody was going to the same church.
Oh yeah, we all went to the same church. So I remember Carol and James were not religious. So our first main upline that we had, not religious. Also a driving factor into us getting involved.
Right, okay.
My husband was at the time religious.
Right.
So it was kind of like a little bit of conflict of interest on our ends.
Yeah.
So when we found John and Jane, they were very religious and they were like, you need to come to our church. Like, it's pretty cool. Rianne and Nolan go there. And we were like, oh, well, obviously we're going to go. Exposure. Like, they're diamonds. We want to be in the same room as them. We remember seeing our pastors at functions too. And they would be like, yeah, we just wanted our pastors to come and see kind of what we do. And they're like this small, like little church here in Leduc. And it's non-denominational too. So that was like kind of nice. It was a good church. Like for somebody, like I'm not religious. So like going there was like, okay. Cause it was more like they would just talk about stories and like the spirituality around things.
Yeah.
Which was good. But this like dogmatic religion is not great. Like, and that's what Worldwide started to become.
Oh, absolutely.
Like they would have church at major functions.
They did.
And prayer.
Yeah. they
Like,
would tell you that it's optional, but if you didn't go, your upline was talking to you about it. If they didn't see you and then at every major function, and I did it at every single one because I don't know, I just wanted to. Me and my upline all did it, but you get saved, right?
What?
John, especially at Spring Leadership. I think maybe it was just Spring Leadership that did this.
I don't think we ever went to a church service. I think we just slept in. We were like, we don't care to
well,
go.
my upline were all like, we're going. And our upline, John and Barbara, who were the Eagles, who were our Eagles who went Ruby, right? They were going. And that was a huge thing. And it would be like, let's all just go together. And so I would go to every single church service. And I remember at Spring Leadership, John Maxwell would do the whole like, come down here if you want to get saved. And like we did every time, which is so funny. I was not by any means, like I grew up with like my grandma was super religious and I grew up in the Catholic Church. But I was by no means religious. I've never, like, it's never been pushed on me. Anything, any faith that I have now is just things that I've kind of acquired along the way. And I'm by no means like rigid with it. But Worldwide definitely kind of pushes that rigidity. Is that a word? Because it is. They really did, because they would have the pastor. So I'm saying John Maxwell's name because he is such a large figure. He's an author.
Oh, and he speaks very openly about being involved. And
but the Worldwide had a specific dedicated person who was the quote pastor of Worldwide. This guy, I don't remember the name of the book. I think you mentioned it before.
It's can I say the name?
You can say the name. If they want to Google it, that's up to them.
Stay married. Get married, stay married.
So the pastor, if you want to look this up, again, we're not saying his name, but this is the name of a book that's public, right? This is a public book. But he talks in this book about cheating on his wife. And this is the book that they're recommending, right? So we had a specific book list. A majority of the books were religious. I mean, there were some great ones. We had talked about before, like how to win friends and influence people.
Brene Brown was great. I remember her being very secular, and that was fantastic.
But a lot of their books were religious, and this book was one that they would tell married couples to read.
The big one for me was Love and Respect, man. I literally, I could talk about that book for hours. I've told, like, I still have it somewhere in one of these boxes. And my husband wants to shoot it. That's what he said. He's like, I'm going to shoot the book.
Hell yeah.
Sweet.
I mean, do it.
You'll know better after.
That would be so fun to take. I wish I would have done that with all of my old like board plan notes, just taking them out and taking like a 22 to them, or even like,
oh man,
it's just any type of gun I can get my hands on, taking them out.
Absolutely.
All of Kyle's letters. Actually, I did.
Can you burn them?
I burned some of them. So in our previous story, we have a story about our ex-boyfriend, Kyle, terrible person, by the way. But he would write me letters from prison. And my friend, we went shooting in the woods, and I pinned it up to a tree and I shot it with a 9mm. And I was by no means unhappy about that. Gun safety is super important. We just want to throw that out there, but
absolutely.
But it was a good thing. And I did burn a lot of them too.
No, okay. Love and Respect. I could literally, like, I've warned everybody in my life about that book. I've made like mass posts on Facebook about Love and Respect and like how terrible it is. And then been like, can't wait for my Amway upline to see this. Like,
absolutely.
Like, because they would preach that book like it was God's word, and it wasn't.
They really did.
And all they would do is there was a line in Ephesians 5 that literally says like, men shall love their wives and women must respect their husbands. Like, that's literally like all it says.
That's
in Ephesians. Like, there is so much other stuff in the Bible that doesn't say that.
Sure.
Like, it really says like respect each other equally, but they base the whole book off of this like little tiny blurb in the Bible. And that was it.
Right.
And it was like the guy would leave wet towels on the bed. Like, that's a blurb from this book. And he would leave all these wet towels, and then he would get mad when his wife would say, don't do that. Don't leave wet towels on the bed.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm getting pissed. Like,
the worst part about it is like, she went on vacation with their daughter, and it was just him and the two sons at home. And when she came back from vacation, he was like, did you miss me? Like, you know, and he was like, didn't miss your nagging. And they were like, that's okay. Yeah, he was right to say that.
Wow. If that's your significant other, you guys get help. That's leading into domestic violence. That is toxic.
It
that
is
not acceptable.
massively. I remember, I think Love and Respect is almost what snapped me out. Like, it was like, I literally tried, I don't even think I could make it through like my 15 minutes of reading that I had to do.
Sure.
I was like, I can barely read this book. There is some like okay stuff in there. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, there is an okay marriage advice, but it was like
majority bad.
Like, if this gets into the wrong man's hands, could hurt people.
Imagine if Kyle read this book.
It would
Kyle
be
it was very similar because this book was not on, this is just in reference to Kyle, but he read this book called The Art of Seduction. This is a real book. He read this in prison. He took notes about seducing a victim.
Oh.
So imagine you're so right to imagine if this book got into the wrong person's hands, because there are psychopaths out there who do this shit. Like him.
Absolutely. Like him. Yeah. And Worldwide would like, I remember there was like this couple, and if you know, the woman had like the squeakiest, tiniest voice. I don't know what it's called, but it's like when their parents were diamonds and then they automatically got to like, yeah, it was, yeah, and the woman had like a really high-pitched voice.
I think I know who you're talking about, but I'm going to confirm after. Are their parents diamonds?
Yeah. But like, I don't know if they speak anymore.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't remember at this point, but I just remember this woman's voice because it was so like, squeaky. This is the time to go to the bathroom because I don't want to hear this woman talk. It was like, and it was sad too, because like, it's just her voice. Like, I didn't want to be an ass, but it was like, okay, I can't listen to you. But she read parts of Love and Respect on stage. And she like did the whole acronym of chairs, which is like what a man needs, which is like, I can't remember all of them, but it was like hierarchy, affirmation, authority was one of them.
Oh God.
Like, it was like in shoulder time, like if your husband's doing something, you have to sit right beside him. That means a lot. Like, it was one of them was like sexuality. And that's the one that got me like really riled, because it was like, your husband's gonna cheat on you if you don't have sex with him every 48 hours.
Yes.
You remember this? Yeah.
This a person who had reached out to us, who had talked about this, had mentioned that their upline was basically telling them they had to be intimate with their significant other, otherwise that significant other would then peruse other avenues, if you will.
Yeah.
And it was I mean, I'm so grateful because I was not in the business as a couple. I was a single. But when you hear what these couples are being taught by their upline, and what was crazy about this particular person had been kind of in the same line of sponsorship. I mean, she broke off at a couple leaders ahead, but after that, like, they were still around the same people. And you think like, oh my gosh, I looked up to these people. And that person was like, I did too. And it was just so sad to hear that. But
they would, but they wouldn't like directly preach that. Like, they would just give you the book and then be like, follow this book. Right. And it was like, I remember Nolan talking about it all the time in board plans. Like, he was like, I'm a man, I need respect. I need, And then Rianne would come up and be like, I'm just a woman. I just need love. And that's just how I, and I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I was like, I want respect. I was like, I don't know why that's like a thing. Like, I can't have just because, I have different parts. Like, that doesn't make sense.
Oh, exactly. You're no less than. And I mean, if anything, like, you're giving birth to a child for this person. I mean, is that not a lot of respect?
Oh, and that's one of the worst parts in the books too, is it talks about postpartum. And it talks about how hard that time is on your husband and your period, because he's being, withheld sex during that time.
God.
It's so hard for him.
You know what? We could have a separate episode and we could talk about this book. I think we should read it.
Yeah.
And we should all talk about it. I'm down, because that in itself, like, outside of Worldwide, we could have an entire episode about. I'm down for that. Honestly.
If you listen, there's a Bare Marriage. This woman named Sheila Ray Gregoire, she critiqued Love and Respect to the point that she gained thousands of followers. That's how I found out. That's when I went to my upline and went, Love and Respect is bad. And she's like, Love and Respect is not bad. It's the only thing to fix your marriage. And I remember reading this woman's blog and listening to her podcast and being like, no, Love and Respect, it could be like a very dangerous book, and it like, and that kind of, I think that's around when I quit. Like, I was like, you guys aren't getting it. Like,
wow,
my man is not the ruler.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
so kind of going back, I remember you said this is kind of when it got suspicious, right? I think you said you're in your second year, still kind of going into your third year. What was that, if you don't mind?
That, like, my husband and I went through like just some trials like throughout our marriage, and this kind of major thing happened, and that's when they kind of were like, this is just how it is, like, this is, you know, just stick it out, like,
what the hell,
this is like, you know. And it wasn't like anything major, like at the time, like now I'm looking back on it and I'm like, yeah, it's a good thing I didn't lose my mind, like, you know, we're still married. So at the same time I felt like a certain way, and I was like, I feel hurt, you know, and he felt, you know, like hurt as well. And it was just kind of the way that it was like being handled, where it was almost like we were, we needed more, like we needed actual probably like counseling for this. Yeah. And just to be like handed this book, literally, it was Love and Respect, and they were like, just read this.
That was the solution.
Like,
was that book?
That was basically the solution.
That's so unfortunate. You know, I had another person who had reached out to me, them and their significant other were having problems. They were told to speak with the author of this book. Oh no, not that book, of the Get Married, Stay Married. This author, right? The pastor of Worldwide, right? Who has this like place where you can go and you're married. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Am I allowed to say that? But
yeah. So they had a phone call with this guy. And this guy was criticizing, was basically like told, it's because you're doing X, Y, and Z and you're not being intimate with your significant other. And this is where your problems are happening. I'm like, excuse me. And when I was told all these things, again, that's why I was like, I can't imagine. You go to like this big guy that you're told to respect, and then he's sitting there telling you that you can't be okay. And then there were so many stories about husbands having porn addictions. That was huge. And
and it was just like such a, like, there was such a weird thing around pornography. I remember that being like, oh, you guys are talking about this like really freely, and like I
frequently too.
Like, and I didn't know it was like considered like evil or like bad. You know what I mean? Like, I knew how I felt about it. I knew like it's a dangerous thing, and like, you know what I mean? But I was like, oh, you guys are talking about this like it's, you know, everybody's doing this all the time.
They do.
And I was like, but we know that too. That's the thing. Like, we still like, we know that this is a taboo topic, and we know that like people are doing this, you know what I mean? And everybody kind of knows that, but we don't talk about it.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. And they brought it up so much.
Well, it was like a way to be vulnerable, because they considered it like a form of adultery as well. Like, they considered it to be like the ultimate sin is basically what it was. Like, and it was all about sinning. That was a big part of it.
Sad, because it's true. And that's how they treated it. And what's funny is they always preached like a quote 4% divorce rate. Let me tell you, Worldwide broke couples up. Sure, it's not getting divorced, but you saw people like they would start out with a boyfriend, and then they would break up in one, or like a girlfriend or whatever, and they would start out in the process together, and one would part ways. And that happened to me. I had a boyfriend when I was going through the process, and because I was really toxic at the time, I will always say this is like, we by no means should have been together. My mom, I've touched on this before, was very toxic, and my mom is a lot of the reason why I kind of sought out Worldwide, because she taught me from a young age that I can't trust my dad. And I was just kind of in that early phases of starting to trust my dad. My dad and I are like this now. We're like super tight, but I wanted to escape her so bad. And the only thing that she had ever taught me was I need to have a significant other to thrive. And so it was like pushed on me. So when I entered into Worldwide, I kind of had seen, like, my dad actually thought he was a great dude. And he was a great guy, super stable, nice person, just not, I had a child at the time, and I don't think he ever wanted kids. And it just was not a good match. But I was convinced that he was not serious about the business, that he was not going to be all in. And that broke us up.
Yeah. You ever hear about the elastic band theory? Did they ever tell you that? Your relationship's going to be like an elastic band. One of you might go towards this business, and then the other will follow, or one will quit and the other will follow, or it'll break.
Yes, you're right.
They would always say that. And I remember that, like, being like, the weird part is like, they would always preach about like staying together.
Yeah.
They would like, stay together, stay together, stay together. But if they're not all in the business, then you leave.
Yeah, like, that's true.
Like, we'll break families up just because they don't want to be in Amway. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
They did. Oh. And it's sad because they also, when it comes to divorce, they will brush that shit under the rug. You don't dare talk about these divorced couples. There was this one lady that I was so inspired by. She was a single mom. They're both from, I think, Washington. And she ended up marrying her upline. They spoke at my first spring leadership or my first family reunion. And I was just so drawn to this person. And at the next major function, she wasn't around anymore and he was a single. And we weren't allowed to ask questions. I was like, what happened to her? And they'd be like, we don't know. And we're not going to talk about it. We're not going to answer that.
It was the same with my uplines that divorced. It was like totally like, we were taking somebody through the process at the time. And we're like, hey, where did James go? Can we talk about it? You know?
Yeah.
And it was like, you know, and my husband and him got pretty close. You know what I mean? Like, we were all like, and then all of a sudden he just disappeared and we never heard from him again. I think maybe my husband ran into him at Walmart once. Like that was it. And then eventually Carol did send a Kate to Oliver downline and was like, hey, I'm going to address the elephant in the room, but like James and I aren't together anymore. Just want you guys to know, like, if you have any questions, if you have any blah, like I was like, but they would fight like cats and dogs, like in front of us. Like it was like, we could tell it wasn't going to work, but.
Yeah, that sounds like Jess and Robert. Robert was I didn't even know. Cause like, they have that cardinal rule, you don't pass negative downline.
Yeah.
And we would never know. I mean, but you could see it. And there were so many red flags about Robert. I had gone to school with him and he's the one who got me around the business. He's was my direct upline. And he was so like, he would put down his wife. Like Jess would do so much for him. And he would just criticize her for every little thing. And a lot of it was because she couldn't sponsor and get sponsored because she couldn't afford it. Yeah. And then by the end of it, he wasn't even working and she was working a full-time job plus doing all of the apps like food delivery and stuff. They would preach that so much. If you didn't have 2 jobs and doing these apps on the side, you are not all in.
Absolutely.
If you're not out till midnight dropping the message, you're not all in.
And like, they would always be like, you have to work business hours. I don't know if they preach that, but like
9 to 5. So you can build a business after 8 to midnight.
Yeah. And I worked waitressing hours. So like I was always working night shift.
Yeah.
So it was like, if anything, I would try to do my prospecting prior to my shift, but I also like to sleep. So when do I want to go out and prospect? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. That was another big one. If you take a nap, you're lazy.
Yeah, you're lazy. Yeah.
Oh man. I don't know, like even these days, like it's hard not to have a guilt-free nap.
Yes,
can absolutely relate. In this, and I feel guilty when I take a nap.
No.
Yeah, so much of that like hustle culture, like that toxic hustle culture, like it's been hard to wash my hands of. You know what I mean?
Oh,
like, thinking that's how to be successful. Right. And it's like, maybe I don't want to be, you know, I read this quote that was like, hustle culture is Stockholm syndrome for capitalism.
100%.
I thought that was so funny. Like, and they were big capitalists worldwide. Like,
of course.
Free enterprise days, right?
Oh yeah. FBD, that's right. That's what it stands for. They would heavily preach that, which I am all about people owning their own businesses and having that freedom. Like, thank goodness we have that, because there are countries that don't. But at the same time, they are pushing it in the most toxic way possible. And it goes far beyond the freedom of owning your own business, because you're not free in worldwide. They tell you freedom, you're not free.
Absolutely. And it's so funny because like, I know like the States is a little bit more right leaning just naturally, you know, but Canada is a little bit more center left.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how did you guys build a religious business? It was in Alberta though. Alberta's like Texas.
Oh, okay.
So we're a little bit more conservative than the rest of the country.
Yeah.
But still, like, I think it's less than 30% of the population is Christian. I'm pretty sure. Like, it's pretty low. Like, and I'm like, how do you guys getting people to be involved that are not religious? Because I remember something clued in when one of the crowns was speaking. I'll say that. One of the big crowns. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, if you know, you know.
House. Yeah. He said something once and I went, oh, I understand why religious people are the ones that build this. And it was basically like, because you're living off of faith.
Yeah.
Right. So it was like, if you're not living off of that, this is going to happen, even though I can't see it. You know what I mean? Religious people tend to have that kind of faith a lot more than a religious people.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and I was like, oh yeah, that's that's why, is because you have to have that vision that you can't see, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like,
oh, absolutely.
it was.
And I would say too, I think a lot of people who get in the business who are not religious to begin with, eventually they get religious.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
if
I was
they're
going to
around
church, man.
long enough, they will turn you. Because
Mm.
I mean, I'm from Portland, which is a very left-leaning city. That's where I'm,
Yeah.
born and raised. And we have a tons of diversity. But when you look at other like parts of worldwide, there's not that diversity. There's really not. They claim that they're out to help everybody. But then people, when they go to a board plan, especially when the board plans are held, I don't know if this was the same over where you're from, but we're in Portland, not here, I'm in Arizona, but in Portland, they would hold board plans at either somebody's personal home or at a church.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, we had so many board plans at churches.
Oh, that's weird. Yeah, it was homes, like apartments and houses and stuff, and then there was also hotels. Was the other one.
Yeah, for like opens and rallies.
Yeah, and then we had like a conference center as well. So never a church.
Yeah, ours, because they would be able to find somebody who like was good in the church with whoever high up in the church, where they could rent out the whole church, not rent out, but get the whole church for free to host these board plans. And I remember going to 3 different churches to have board plans.
Crazy.
And they try to tell you like, this is normal. It's just because it's held in a church doesn't mean we're religious people. But when you get further and further into the business, you learn to like duplication, as they preach that if you're not like your upline. And I think every person who's been involved for a year or more had a period of time where they wanted to be just like their upline.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it a cult.
Yes.
Like, because your upline's your god.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets like super, super spicy. Oh man.
So you're so we're kind of going back to like I think you said year 2 was your honeymoon phase.
Yeah.
So years 3 and 4, because you're in 5 years. So what was like year 3 and 4 kind of like? And when is it that you started to really see like, this is not what I thought it was?
Oh, year 2. Like that was like near the end of year 2, I started to question things, because like that stuff happened between me and my husband. They gave me that book.
Yeah. Oh, that happened in year 2.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. So, and then year 3, we got married. So that was okay. Like it was like my husband and I always talk about our wedding. We're like, we wish it was better, just because we had 3 of our uplines in our wedding party.
Oh, right. I remember we had talked about that before, where now you have these pictures where your upline are in them.
Oh man, I remember like, because I had to plan my bachelorette party, and this is where it gets like super spicy, because I was like, I want to go to a play.
Okay.
And then I wanted to go out. Like I was like, either a casino, a bar, like whatever. Like I wasn't really drinking.
Yeah.
Back then, something just to have a good time, you know? And it was, I remember my upline Jane being like, yeah, I'm not gonna go to the bar. And I was like, okay.
That's fair.
And I remember like thinking, like, she's like, yeah, I won't go to that part. And I was like, okay. And then I remember being like, why? Because I was like, should I be going? Like, should I be going to the bar if my upline's not going to the bar?
Yeah.
And then I remember sending her Kate and being like, why aren't you going? Like, she's like, and I was like, no judgment, but like, I want to know, because should I be going, you know? And she basically was like, I'm not going because like, I don't like the drinking scene. I don't want any of my downline to see me at a bar, you know?
Oh my God, of course.
Yeah, like it was very like, you know, power of duplication. And then she's like, I don't want to disrespect John also. Like, I just want to make sure to respect my husband.
Oh my God, that's right. They were
and I remember
very
being
like that.
How am I disrespecting my husband? I was like, I'm just going to a bar.
Yeah.
But they were really big about that. Like, you had to like honor your husband. And by honoring your husband, you don't get to like go to a bar. Like, it's just a bar. Like, wow. I didn't understand. It wasn't like I was going clubbing. Like, even then though, like it was my bachelorette party.
Right.
So weird. And then, I remember she just had reasons just not for like drinking. Like, I think they were trying to have a kid. So like, I get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was very, and then I don't think Carol went either. My other upline, that was my wedding. It was just 2 girls that went to a casino.
Wow.
That was it. Like, it was just, that was it.
And nothing serious either. I honestly believe that in worldwide they had such a cheating problem, and that's why they have that cardinal rule: don't mess with anyone's spouse and honor your
Well, because they're letting people get away with it, though. That's the thing. That's what Love and Respect was letting people get away with, was being like, men can't help themselves.
Yes.
Like, why not hold men to a higher standard? Like, men aren't deviant people who want to sleep with everything they see. We need to hold men more accountable.
Oh, 100%.
You know, so it was like, to hear them be like, oh, men will sleep with anything that walks. And it was
they
like,
really
how would you
talk
talk about your husband like that? Like, that is so bad. And that's like, I think I'm 90% sure that's why my upline was like, I want to honor my husband. Is I was like, oh, I think you think men are gonna like gawk at you. And for some reason that's disrespectful to your husband.
Right.
You know, and I was like, this is like a weird
It's only disrespectful if you do something and act
exactly
on that.
Like you can walk down the street, someone's gonna gawk at you, they're gonna catcall you, like you can't stop that stuff no matter where you
someone's
are.
Gonna look at you.
Exactly. Like,
that's not up to you.
Right.
Yeah. You're in more danger walking down your street than you are in a club, like in my opinion. Like,
seriously.
For real. Yeah.
So I was like, this is such a weird thing to think. Like, and that was year 3. And then year 4, year 3 we got married. It was all right. Like, I had a downline that got really sensitive and quit because I told her not to send me so many Kates about the same thing over and over again.
Sure. Yeah. And they would do that sometimes. Like, I remember our upline would be like, if it's longer than 5 minutes, that's a phone call.
Yeah.
They're like, I'm not listening to the rest. They would literally tell us that, but yet they wanted us to Kate them about everything. Don't call me, Kate me. If it can be a Kate, but then if it's too long of a Kate, it's a phone call, but then they don't answer your phone calls.
No. Yeah, exactly. I remember, so we had one downline that quit. We launched somebody else. He was very religious. I think he's married now. We haven't talked to him, but and then year 4, I got pregnant. So that's like when I got pregnant with my son. And that was like a very nerve-wracking time because it was not planned, say that.
Right. And this is 2019, right?
2019, that's when I got pregnant with my son. And that's when I think around when I started like getting more invested with Rianne, the diamond, because she was my only upline that has had a natural birth, and I really wanted to have a natural birth.
Yeah.
And she kind of like was like guiding me through like what to say, how to find a midwife, how to like do all these things to like have a natural birth, and ended up like renting a birthing tub, which makes sense. I mean, they told you to do what you do when you have period cramps. Like, they were like, what helps you? And I was like, I like to sit in water. So I got a birthing tub. So she like helped me with that stuff. And then I was like, I really don't want to not have a natural birth. Like, how do I prevent this? Like, I don't want to be drugged. I don't want to have a C-section. I don't want to do that. Like, it scared me so badly. And I also remember them pushing me really hard when I was pregnant. Not like really hard, but it was like, major functions, I would get looks because of how much I had to pee. I remember that, like being like, I have to pee like every 5 minutes, like throughout the whole pregnancy too. That's the thing that sucks, is everybody's like, they think it's like just like the end of pregnancy, but you got to pee the whole time. Like,
from day one, like that's how I knew to take a pregnancy test, was I kept peeing, which I do all the time anyways, but like it was extra.
Yeah, well, it's because you have an extra liter of blood in your body, so your body's getting ready to like, you know, so it's got to filter more blood.
I didn't know that.
Then you're peeing more. So it's like, people are like, why are you peeing so much? It's like, I'm pregnant. It's like, well, you're not that pregnant. It's like, I have so much blood.
Right.
Like, I gotta
There's so much going on.
And I was tired. I was napping like in the car on the breaks. Like, I was so tired. And it was like, I don't know. I just wanted to not have a job when I got back from mat leave. I remember that was the thing. So I would have went back in November of 2020, and I was pregnant in March of 2019, and they were like, it's 2 years, like a 2-year plan. So I was like, that's a year and 5 months. Like, I was 7 months, and I was like, I can do that. I can retire in that time. So and I was really tired. I remember being like super sleepy, but I was also not working because I ended up going on a medical leave. So I was like, that kind of helped, which is good. So I could stay up all hours, you know, go to board plans, not be tired in the morning, all that stuff. But it was still like, definitely in that time, I think I missed my one of my first board plans ever because I couldn't get work off.
Right.
I just started a job. So I was like, I'm not going to ask them for a
Right.
day off. So yeah. And then I gave birth to my son via C-section. And
Exactly what you said you didn't want.
exactly what I didn't want.
So I have a quick question, and you don't have to answer this if it's uncomfortable, but do you feel like you were kind of pressured into this like thought process where you have to give a natural birth because Rianne did?
Yeah, well, it wasn't really Rianne herself as much as it was like some of my cross line were talking
That
about
makes sense.
Yeah. So they were like, oh, I did it naturally. And then they're like, I did it naturally. And this is how I did it. This is how I did it. And then I was like, well, I can't talk to my cross line. So
Right, yeah,
that's
no
when I went
cross-lining.
so that's when I went to Rihanna and was like, I'm told to talk to you if I want to try to do this. And that's like, it wasn't really like, they didn't really shame me, but I could see like them being like, I love natural birth. And then
Right.
yeah. And then when they were like, my husband went to a board plan after I had my son, and Rianne was like, how did labor go? And then my husband's like, she had a C-section. She's like, oh, that sucks. And I was like,
why would you say that to somebody? Like, yes, this maybe the circumstances around the C-section, right? Like maybe there's an emergency happening.
Right.
Yeah.
The emergency itself sucks, but the C-section does not suck. Well,
Yeah.
my kids were via C-section, and like
Yeah.
you're no less than a woman because your kid was cut out of you versus
Oh man,
coming out of, you know what I
it is so bad.
Yeah,
It was
my
like,
first one was terrible.
yeah, well, I've only had the one.
Oh,
for
right,
now.
okay. I have
But if
to
I got
add
more,
two.
then I don't know what I'm gonna do at that point. I'm
Sure.
gonna see what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But the first one was like, because my son was stuck, but he also
Right.
pooped inside me.
Oh,
So his heart rate was dropping.
yeah.
Mhm.
So when they broke my water, he kept getting flushed with the meconium.
Oh gosh.
Oh no.
So his heart rate was dropping.
Yeah.
And then he was stuck. And he would not move.
Right.
So then they were like, we're gonna do forceps, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. And I was like, no, just cut him out, man.
Right.
I don't want to go through all that and then
Yeah, that's traumatic.
cut open anyway.
That was incredibly traumatic.
Oh, it was so bad. And then I almost died, which was not cool either.
Oh my
like,
gosh.
yeah, that was like one of the scariest parts of it. Cause I was like, I remember being like, finally, because I did it all naturally. That's the thing that sucked. Cause I was like
Yeah.
literally screaming in pain, and I had to like sign consent forms and like give them my healthcare information and be like, oh, it was like so bad. And then I had to like consent to like this whole thing. And I'm like
Yeah.
literally 10 centimeters, like I'm hurting.
Oh.
And then they like, wheeled me into the room, and then they gave me my epidural. That was really nice. Yeah. And then I had something called atony, which is basically like when they removed him, cut the cord and like moved him, my uterus didn't go back. Like it wasn't contracting. So like the blood vessels
Oh.
just bleed freely. So like
Wow.
it was a hemorrhage basically. So like,
Yeah.
Oh wow.
That's
that was
scary.
a scary time. I didn't lose enough to get a transfusion,
Sure.
but it was like,
Good.
it was close. So I was like, but I
That's
did have to
scary.
get this weird like iron bag. I remember that.
Mm,
And that
makes
was
sense.
like, made me a little nauseous, but
yeah.
So
Yeah.
you went through this incredibly traumatic birth,
yeah.
and these people had the audacity to say, "Oh, that sucks."
Yeah. Basically.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
no, that their response sucks.
Yeah, it did.
That's
And it
fucked
was
up.
like, and like I still had to deal with like, there was like I'm going to therapy now because I'm like, there's a lot of like trauma that I got from that childbirth. But I
Yeah,
think a
yeah,
lot of the
I can
shame
imagine.
that I have was stemmed from them mostly.
Oh, I
And
bet.
I'm slowly starting to realize that it was like, oh, it was this cult that I was involved in that made me
Right.
feel like shameful for not having a natural birth. So
That sucks.
yeah.
Because imagine if Rianne had that happen. She would be
I-
telling everybody, it's fine, but because she hasn't experienced that, she can't speak to it. She can
Mhm.
only speak to what she
Well,
knows.
she also she has 4 kids when I quit. I don't know. They might have like 10 more or something by now, but they like
Those hump days.
they have like, yeah, right? Like, but
All
she
this
I
time.
remember her first birth was not great. She did it in a hospital, had to have an epidural, didn't want one. Second birth, she ended up having a placental something. She hemorrhaged too.
Mhm.
Right.
And then 2 births at home. The last 2 were at home.
Wow.
So I remember like talking to her and being like, I don't want to give birth in a hospital because I think they're going to push me to not do this naturally. And she's like, they will push you to not do it naturally. And I was like, but I needed to not do it naturally, which is what sucked.
Yeah.
Right.
So
That's so sad. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure maybe because I know, like you had mentioned, the US is a lot more right leaning.
mhm.
But even where and I'm from a more liberal state, but well, my oldest was born in New York, but both times, right, when I was seeing doctors, nobody ever like pushed me to change my decisions.
Yeah.
They were always very forthcoming with information and like, hey, these are your risks. This is what's going on. But whatever you want to do, I mean, unless it's an emergency C-section, right?
Yeah.
Then I mean, I've never been pushed to make a decision one way or the other.
Yeah, my midwife afterwards, I remember going to talk to her because my midwife's all about that natural birth too. Like,
Sure. Yeah.
that's the reason I had a midwife and not a doctor.
Right.
She's like, it's really good that you did because they found the meconium present. And like, if we could have waited any longer, like it could have been dangerous and you could have got like an infection or something. Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, thanks. Like, and I was like, now I feel a little bit better at least. But
Yeah.
at the same time, like, what if I was to do it at home? And like, I tried to tell everybody I was going to, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I was even thinking hotel birth, something like that, because I lived in an apartment. So I was like, you know,
Right.
but yeah, this whole like birth thing kind of traumatized me. And I think because my husband and I both took parental leave, like during that time, it was wild because I'm like, I started to get like not really involved in the business.
Right.
I was like, you know, especially because like I gave birth to my son like a few days before Christmas, you know, holiday season. I wasn't really thinking about sending a cake, you know.
Oh, sure.
Right.
And we missed one of the big functions. I remember that. And then a month later was dream night. I think I went to dream night and it was virtual. It was our first virtual dream night. Yeah.
That's
the whole
I have
thing.
so many questions actually.
Yeah.
So now we're getting into the end of 2019. So I had actually stopped the business probably, I don't know exact date, but it was like midway through 2019 because by the time 2020 hit, I was no longer involved and I hadn't even heard from these people about anything. Like, so 2020, COVID, coronavirus, this whole unprecedented time around the entire world. Okay. Everybody knows about COVID.
Yep.
So I'm so curious how COVID was handled with worldwide.
It was so weird. Cause like, I remember being like, we were at, it was kind of like a nuts and bolts with just John and Jane and then their downline in this one leg, I think. Anyway, that's when we started to get kind of nervous. Like, COVID wasn't really like a thing yet.
Sure.
I remember John being like, it's hyped up. Like, it's not really gonna, like, nothing's gonna happen. Like,
yeah.
But we all kind of felt that way at first. Like, we're like, it's not really that dangerous. You
Absolutely.
know what I mean?
It was like, it was one of those, like, do we be scared of it? Like, nah, it's not here yet. And then I feel like it was a big deal. And then it wasn't a big deal. And then it was like almost kind of like overnight. It was a big deal.
Yeah, it was fast. I remember them being like, okay, we're shutting everything down for 2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks. Remember, it was just going to be 2 weeks. I remember that.
Flatten the curve.
Flatten the curve in 2 weeks. That 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, man.
So before the shutdown, right, we're starting to have these conversations about COVID as it's outbreaking in China.
Yeah.
What was Worldwide's perspective then before shutdown?
They didn't really say much until it happened. And like at that point, it was kind of like panic mode because spring leadership was in like 2 weeks.
Right. It was around that time because I don't know when Canada and your specific area had a shutdown. Our shutdown was March 13th in Oregon.
Yeah, it was exactly the same.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we shut down at the same time. And it was like everybody panicked about spring leadership. And I remember being like, okay, well, we procrastinate everything. So we were like, we didn't even book a hotel at that point. So, but my son was just like a few months old. So we were like going to bring him and my mom and then my husband and me were going to go to the function and my mom would watch my son during the days. I remember all that got canceled and being like, wow, that's actually really good. Like, I'm really happy that I don't have to like take my few-month-old baby.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not something that I used to feel. Like I was like, I never used to really feel like I wanted to miss out on functions. So like, it's kind of like a new feeling being like, oh, I don't have to do all this.
Thank goodness I don't have to go because they would hype these functions up, right? They would say, anyway, if you don't go to a major function, you're going to quit.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's for real. So like,
oh, it's true. Same.
They reimbursed us, which is good. So they like reimbursed us for the spring leadership. They're like, here's your ticket back. Sorry, it's canceled. We're gonna do a day long in May. They're gonna do a day long spring leadership on Dreamstream, and it was all like all the diamonds. Like it was so many people.
Oh yeah, I'm sure
they had, and it was 10 hours in our house, 10 hours in our home.
Right. I remember
Like,
we had that conversation about how when you go in person to a function, 10 hours it just goes by so fast. You don't really recognize that it's 10 hours. But when you said it to me, you're like, this was a 10-hour live stream. I was like, that's forever.
Yeah. And it was like at home, and like we had my stepsister's baby shower too that day. And I remember being like, I gotta get out of the house. Like, this is getting too much. And the worst part, like, this is the spiciest part about this whole function, was the green screens.
Okay? Oh, the green screens.
They had green screens. So they were doing like meetings like you would at work over Teams, but there was like yachts and like nice houses. And like it was so weird, like because you would see like the two, you know who I'm talking about. She was single, now she's not single.
Yes.
They would, yeah, okay. And they were sitting on what looked like the back of a boat. And this is what clued me into the green screen, was because they like moved their head and you could see the stream behind them wasn't moving. And I was like, what are they doing? Like nothing is moving. Is this a green screen? And then another couple came on who's like been in the business for a million years, and they had a green screen. And I was like, what the heck? Like they had like these wind chimes that looked like behind them that weren't moving.
That's so cringe.
And I was like, this is so weird. So we texted John, our upline, and we were like, hey, are they using a green screen? Like, what's going on? And he's like, oh, it's all pre-recorded. And we're like, still though, couldn't they like record it in their house?
Right. Why not?
We weren't allowed to gather, right? So it was like, are they just putting them in front of green screens? They're all in a room or something? Like that's what I was thinking. And I was like, why are they using green screens? Why wouldn't they just, you know what I mean? Are they in a studio or something when they're supposed to be home? And that's what it looked like. It's like these people are supposed to be home,
but they were.
It doesn't look like they're home.
Sure.
So looks like they're recording this somewhere. So I remember being like, okay, that's super weird. And then around mid-April, we had a friend pass away of COVID.
That's so devastating.
Sad. Yeah. And he was 25.
That's
so it was
young.
like, yeah, he just got a bad, like his body just didn't react to it well. And they always said that. They always said like some people just don't react to this as well as others, right?
Yeah, it was very unknown at that time. Like it was like it became like, oh, it's only people with underlying illnesses. Yeah. But then you did start to hear those stories about people who were like young and healthy, and then all of a sudden they're on a ventilator and then they're not there the next day, and it's all because of COVID, and that's terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And like that's when I was like, oh, I can't wait for a vaccine. Like I remember being like so pumped for a vaccine because I was like, if they find something that can stop this spread, like we'll all go back to normal. Sure. Literally, like I was like, that this is gonna be what ends this.
Yeah.
And I remember, I'll get into that in a minute, but they were like, and then they tried to charge us $125 per person for family reunion over Dreamstream again.
What?
Yeah. And I was like, this is not gonna happen. I'm not paying money.
Why?
I don't know. And that's the thing, like at that point it was so obvious they were paying the diamonds, because at first they were like, oh, we're just paying for the sound, for the venue, for this, for that.
That was justified. You're talking about paying for a seat in an arena. I mean, we go to concerts, we know what they're like. So that's when it became kind of blaringly obvious to you that it was not about helping people.
No, it's definitely about money. And like I've read things online now that have like said like the diamonds were paid for those functions. Like thousands of dollars, like of our money, but it's a pyramid scheme, right?
Yeah. They're not paid speakers. They're speaking for free for charity. They would tell us they're volunteering.
Well, yeah, they were like, we had to get babysitters, so this is being paid out of our pocket.
Yeah, they would really BS us like that. And we'd be sitting there like with our journals, like writing down everything that they said as if it was pure gold, but they were really only speaking it's all alleged, right? Like we don't know for sure what's going on, but we have this pure speculation that this is happening. And it seems like what happened with your family reunion being virtual and they were wanting you to pay for it. I mean, that kind of adds to the suspicion, right?
Yeah. And it was like, so there was that. We finally were like, no, we're not going to pay for this. Me and my husband were like, because I was on maternity leave, like I was making barely any money.
Yeah.
Like, I think it was like $300 a week or something like that. And I was like, we can't afford that to go.
Right.
And then I think that's when we both kind of like snapped out of it. Because the thing is the major functions I feel were like so strategically placed.
Oh, 100%. They'd have one
Like,
every quarter.
as soon as I like started to get like no motivation to build the business, a major function would show up.
Yep.
And it was like, it was just the way that it worked. And then to miss like barely watch Dream Night, and then also Dream Stream Spring Leadership, and then missing family reunion. That's when we both were like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? We're paying hundreds of dollars a month for this.
Seriously.
Like, it was so like, and that's when we're like, we got to quit and then maybe come back.
Right.
And that was like our mindset was like, we got to quit now because we can't afford the overhead.
Right.
And then, because it was like what, $210 for us? I don't know how much it was for you, but it was like 75 for Kate and like 150 for.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was about $112 is what they've reached. I'm sure it had gone up over time. Like Kate, I think became more expensive over time. So I think it went up to like 125.
Yeah, but it was all USD. So it was like for us.
For you guys, it was a lot more.
Yeah. So dollar amounts. And then we would be like, okay. And that was all USD.
Yeah.
So it was like,
so that's another question that I have. So in addition to the overhead, I forgot about the overhead business. They would always preach like, oh, it only costs you $115 to have this business, right?
Yeah.
So during COVID, when COVID hit, were there any Kates passed down about Ditto? And how were people maintaining their Ditto? So for anybody who doesn't know, because I haven't mentioned this before, Ditto, right, is the automatic sending of your products, because Worldwide had taught us that we had to buy our own products from, quote, our own store. And it sounds like for you guys, it was 150 PV.
Yeah, each though.
Each,
like,
right.
Each spouse, yeah.
And then when you guys got married, did it change?
No, still like 300. They were like 300 PV.
Oh, 300, right. That would still be 150 each. That makes sense. So where I was from in Portland, our leadership was preaching 200 PV for singles.
See, they tried to do 300. They were trying to do 300 for singles because you could build,
it would be like faster.
Yeah, it would be like platinum versus double equal ruby.
Yes, exactly. And that's the circles, right? They would say that's why you have that's why we have you do 200 PV. And I remember they would create these incentives that were like, do you remember Heart to Heart?
No.
Okay. They had Heart to Heart during this time. I'm sure you were around at this time, and they made it to where it was a women only event, and it was ran by the top crown. She was going to be there. Like Lady Diamonds were going to be there.
Sounds like familiar.
It was like 300 PV, and this was a women only event. I'm skeptical as to why they raised the event just for women, because I was a single. I couldn't afford 300 PV. I was paying for childcare, for rent.
Yeah, no, we did something like that with just Rianne and Mary. They did something just in Edmonton here.
Okay.
I can't remember what it was called, but I remember them doing like a whole section on dressing for your body type. And I remember being like kind of like offended by that.
Oh, I bet.
Like, why are they telling us like what to wear?
They really did that during our nuts and bolts too.
Yeah, it was like, I remember thinking that was really weird. I'm like, why don't they just let us wear clothes? And my husband's like, don't read into it so much. Like, he's like, it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
And I was like, still, like, I'm getting, I don't know. But when it comes to Cave, so when it comes to Ditto, through that, I think I was checked out at that point. Like, I don't think I was listening to Kate or anything.
Got it.
At that point. I remember vitamins. I remember them being pretty big about the vitamins.
During COVID?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Like those are some freaking cure all.
That was the biggest thing, is they were like, you need to be on Big Crown's vitamin plan.
Yeah.
They would always say that. You gotta be on his vitamin plan. And it was like, if you're not, you're wrong.
Right. They really would. And a lot of it too. That's why I'm so curious, because during COVID, like everyone's getting laid off of their jobs, right?
Yeah.
Or they're working remotely. I mean, some people were very fortunate to get to work remotely. I'm so curious if they especially in the States, right? I'm thinking of all the people who were getting unemployment. And then in addition to their unemployment during that time, they were getting like different stimuluses as well.
We got CERB, called CERB, and it was Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit. That's what it stands for. And I was on maternity leave and my husband was essential. So we didn't get anything.
I'm so curious how they were telling people to use their unemployment for their Ditto, or if they're telling people put your stimulus into your Ditto, and were they giving people forgiveness for not being able to make their Ditto?
Because I remember them saying that they were really thankful to be diamonds.
Oh my God, of course.
I remember that. They were like, thank God during this time that we are diamonds and we have to maintain our lifestyle.
Oh my God.
I remember thinking that, but like, I bet people were dropping like flies, man. Like, I think like after the pandemic kind of like happened, that I think I would bet money that somebody fell out of diamond.
And I'm so curious to see. I'm hoping that somebody will reach out to us and like want to talk to us who was around during COVID. I know in the Facebook group, somebody posed that question and was like, hey, anybody from the Portland area, like, what was it like during COVID? And I had commented on it just in response saying, like, I bet they used it as leverage. Somebody responded and said, I was around at that time, and they did. They would say, you want to build another avenue, another revenue stream in case you lose your job, because now we see jobs aren't stable.
Yeah, there was a big preach, but they would also like, they would always preach too about being like, oh, what was I gonna say? They always would preach how they were anti-mask and anti-lockdown. They were very anti-lockdown, obviously.
Oh yeah, because it takes away from their income. And anti-mask, right? Lockdown, what anti-vax too, right? I'm sure.
Yeah, everything. Yeah. But I like, it was very much like government regulation. Like that's what they were against, was government regulation. There was another couple you would probably know. The guy talks really fast and his parents were Diamond.
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about now. Yep.
Yeah.
Right. As soon as you said that, I was like, yep. Clicked.
I remember seeing a secondhand Instagram post of this guy being like, oh, you don't want to go out and get your freedom. You know,
oh my gosh,
to get your freedom. And it's like, there's a literal pandemic that could kill your elderly parents. Like, just so you know, like that's what's happening. And I just remember following Rianne on Instagram, and she would post like a bunch of anti-vaccination, a bunch of like anti-lockdowns, masks, you know. Mary too. Mary was bad. She went to a Starbucks and posted a whole Instagram story about how they asked her to wear a mask. And she was like, how stupid is it that I have to wear a mask inside a Starbucks, but I sit down and I take my mask off? And they were like, why aren't you questioning this? Yeah. So Mary would always just kind of be like bitching about masks and stuff, like having to go to Starbucks for her little whatever meetings she was doing. Being like, why do I have to wear a mask? Meetings? I think so. I'm like 90% sure. She wouldn't say anything outright.
Right.
But she actually got cancer, which is super sad.
That is devastating.
Yeah, she got like stage 2 Hodgkin's lymphoma, I think.
Oh, wow. That's very sad.
Yeah, and then she got COVID and meningitis all at the same time. Like I remember being like, holy moly, how is Dawn handling this?
Yeah, holy crap.
She found out when she was pregnant with her 5th kid.
Oh my
God. It was so sad. I was like, oh, well, you don't deserve that. Like, that's really sad. And I was like, you know, like, I was like,
it is sad.
Yeah. But yeah, they're like, I wasn't really close to Dawn and Mary.
Sure.
Like, not as close as Nolan and Rianne, but still, like.
You're like Diamond grandparents, if you will.
Yeah, they were my Diamond grandparents for sure, because they were my upline Diamond for a while.
Yeah. And
then Nolan and Rianne were my upline Platinum and Diamond. So sad they were my grandparents. But yeah, I think I was already out when I started like following all their Instagram and stuff.
Oh, really?
My husband still talked to John. He still talked to him like a lot.
Right.
And until recently when he was like, I think this guy's crazy. And I was like, yeah, I think he's crazy too. Cause he's so pro-gun, pro like all like crazy like right-wing stuff all over his Facebook. But we're not allowed to use social media.
That's wild, because they would really preach don't use social media all the time, but yet they are heavily on social media. Like I follow Taylor's wife on Instagram still. Yeah. And what's funny is they all moved to Arizona, and I'm pissed because I live in Arizona now. And I'm like I'm kind of hoping I run into somebody and somebody's going to drop the message with me. And I'm going to be like, let me tell you.
I ran into Jane at Walmart a couple of years ago, like maybe a year ago, right when I started my meds, my ADHD meds. And I ran into her. I was already back at work. Yeah. And I ran into her and I was like, oh, I got to say hi.
Right.
I should, like, you know, she was one of my bridesmaids. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, wow. Yeah.
We were friends. And she's like, oh my gosh, hey, like, how's it going? I was like, I'm just getting my meds. And she's like, oh, how are you doing? Blah, blah. And then we talked about how like her husband was going to open a business or something random here in Leduc. And I was like, okay. And then she's like, well, gotta go, talk to you later. And I was like, you're going out hunting, aren't you? Like, you're going hunting for people.
Spear hunting.
Yeah.
Or what they call shopping with a purpose.
But she was wearing a mask. So I was pretty impressed.
Well, yeah, I mean, we'd hope so. And that's such a, like, I get that some people are anti-mask, which if an individual feels that way, like, okay, you feel that way, whatever you feel, but you're talking about leaders of an organization, right? Of a broader organization. You're talking hundreds of potentially thousands of people.
Like, and you're allowed to question things. Like, that's the thing. Like, it's okay to, we live in a free country. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
You can question vaccines. You can question masks. You can question lockdowns, but you can't do that when you have as much influence.
I have to agree with you there.
Like, that is so, because I have a feeling like probably most of the rallies and stuff like that were happening in Edmonton were like probably these guys, because they had a massive organization. I think they had like 2,000 people just in Edmonton. Right. And we don't have very many people. We have like a million people that live here. So it's like, oh man.
That's devastating, because you've got a wide variety of people in your business. And I remember seeing in Zay and Melody's video, and I can't remember exactly, but I think that a Crown specifically had sent down a Kate about like anti-COVID stuff. And I'm like not surprised because of how he is. Like, it boggles my mind. And
absolutely,
it leads me to my next question of like, what was life like for you after you left? Like, kind of the immediate days and weeks and months, and what was that like?
I remember feeling like really good about not having kind of a direction for a little bit. Like, I remember being like, I got like really good at my job. I worked at Aurora Cannabis. And I got back from maternity leave in November of 2020, and I was promoted by August of 2019.
Wow.
Or 2021, sorry.
It's okay.
And so like, it was like just over 9 months it took me to get promoted.
Wow.
Out of like a bunch of people that were there for so long, and I was only there for like 9 months. So I was like, oh, so I got like really good at my job, which was good.
Yeah.
Because I could put the effort in and not feel guilty.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it was like I could put the effort
love
in.
Your
like,
job.
And I like really liked this place. Like, all my coworkers were hilarious. Like, we had a good time all the time.
Yeah.
But my work got shut down. That was kind of a bummer. So like, we all lost our jobs this past April. But I remember me and my husband were fighting a lot. Like a lot.
Right.
But it could have been just like me being kind of stir crazy, because like I was at home through a pandemic for like 10 months by myself.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it was like I couldn't call my mom to help me with a newborn. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't do stuff like that. So I was going like kind of crazy.
Oh my gosh, I bet. Like, I didn't even think of stuff like that, to be honest, where you're like, because I had my son before COVID, and it was like I had like so much support. People could come visit me in the hospital. And you brought up a whole different side of COVID where it's like you were taking care of this. Like, they say it takes a village, and you didn't have your village.
No, it was just me all day by myself learning this tiny thing that I was like, what is this? How does it work?
Yeah.
And my husband was working full time. So it was like, I could have been going stir crazy a little bit, but we started fighting a lot.
Right.
We didn't have an avenue to talk to anybody.
Right. Because
you know what I mean?
No longer in the
business.
business.
You can't go anywhere either.
Yeah. So it was like, I wouldn't be surprised like if something blows up between us, but like we made it through. Like, we realized we were kind of just being stir crazy, but it was just little things, like household things. You know what I mean? Like, it was so wild. But that was basically my coming months. I didn't hear from my upline ever again. Like,
isn't that funny how they say, well, like my upline, they would literally say the words, you'll quit us before we quit you. And it's not about the money. We're going to be best friends no matter what. Like, my upline Eagle, Jenny, she was in the room with me when I gave birth.
Yeah.
I mean, she had to jet out immediately after my kid was pushed out, or I guess cut out. But you know, it's crazy how you never hear from them again. And what's so funny, I only heard from Craig since we uploaded our first episode about Worldwide.
Because he messaged Danny.
He messaged me, and I have no idea what his intentions were. He sent a nice message, was like, hey, I hope you and your boys are doing well. It's been a long time. But he did not reach out to me. It's been 3 years. And it's because of the episode. I imagined that they would have wanted to manipulate their way into getting back to talk to me. Maybe not necessarily for the business, but to delete our episodes about Worldwide.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I suspect. That's why we shouted out Craig. We know you're there, Craig. You're listening to our episodes, and we're not going to stop. Anybody who wants to come and talk to us about their experience with Worldwide, please do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, you guys are doing great work here, for real. Like, it's been good chatting with somebody that I don't feel being like, because I've talked to people about it that have never been introduced, and they're like, how the hell did you get into that?
That's Corey.
And you're like, I don't know how to explain it.
You
like,
don't know how.
Like, they find people that are in vulnerable positions, like, and they're like, young or going through something, or you know what I mean,
Or they
losing
hate their
businesses.
job, and
Yeah, like
that's exactly how they drop the message.
oh,
Hey, basically like, hey, do you hate your job? Oh, do you keep your options open? That's a simple.
yeah,
And if they say, well, I mean, yeah, like then boom, drop a message, you grab their phone number, and you're blowing them up to get them to a board plan because your
yeah,
upline is hounding on you that you have not had a guest in like a month or two.
yeah,
And then they don't pay as much attention to you because you're not bringing them business. So they're going to go pay attention to another leg of business, and they make you feel guilty for that.
yeah, it's so messed up, man.
So you're not
Like,
crazy. There's
no,
many
that's
like
true.
you and me out there.
Yeah, it's been definitely like my husband deals with a lot more of the shameful side of it, where he's like sad at how he got tricked. He's like, I was like,
Yeah.
what do they call it? Like the snake venom salesman? Is that what it is? It's
I
like a
mean,
saying.
I'm not sure of the saying, but I definitely can relate. I didn't talk about it for 3 years.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
it was hard because it's like, I'm so ashamed. How could I have done this to myself? How
Absolutely.
so I don't know if you've ever calculated out, but do you know roughly how much money you lost because of the business?
I don't know, man. I think because there was months that we like, I think I tried to draw it out. My husband's like, please don't. I don't want to know.
Sure.
Like, yeah, he's like, I really don't want to know, but it has to be at least like 20 grand. It has to be at least.
Yeah.
Like that's like being nice. Like,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Especially over the course of, you're talking about, let's say, like for me, it was $600 a month for 200 PV. So it's $715 a month for ditto, for the overhead, for everything.
Yeah.
And that times 12, right? For a year times 3, because I did my ditto faithfully every stupid month until the very end when I had 2 kids that I had. And I would say I probably lost upwards of like $25,000.
Wow.
And
yeah.
That's a small number compared to people who were in the business 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years.
I know. Like my upline, Carol, she quit too. I reached out to her because I was like, I want to know all the goss. Like, I want to know what gossip's going around.
Oh,
here.
of course.
Like, and she's like, no, I quit. And I was like, well, do you talk to anybody still? Like, do you know how anybody's doing? She never answered me. I was like, I want to know if they're out of diamond qual.
Right. I mean, I am definitely so curious too. Like I just wonder what the business looks like today, because I've heard from somebody who reached out to me. They had recently quit, and they said that the way that the business is done now is very different, that they're not pushing, they're pushing more client volume now. Ever since COVID, they're pushing people to like get people to buy from them. They're going more sales direction. I mean, I remember when I started, like, this is not sales. I hate sales. This will never be sales. Right. And they would tell us we were buying our products for ourselves, and we would buy 200 PV total. We'd say 150 is for me. And we would write, and we would record on Amway's website that we folks sold 50 PV of it to a family member, which I never sold to a family member. I would buy things and maybe give it to my family. But I never I've never had somebody give me money for a product.
Yeah, there's 2 big things there. One, you have to have 600 customer volume a year in order to be considered legitimate.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they say, they're like, oh, that's just like what's kind of required.
Yeah.
If you don't make that customer PV, it goes to your upline.
Yes, it does. That's right. If you don't record it, that money goes up to your upline. Yep.
Yeah. And then another thing is they might be going sales direction, because in order to not be considered a pyramid scheme, you have to be product oriented, not people oriented.
Right. That's a good speculation.
Yeah. So they might just be like, oh, people are starting to catch on that it's all mentorship and recruitment and not actually Amway, because they say that over and over and over again.
They did 100%.
They're like, Amway, we don't care.
Yeah, they would say during the Amway's going to come during the function. They're going to talk, but you're going to go to the bathroom during that time because we don't.
That's your break time. Yep.
Wow.
Absolutely.
But that's their distribution company, and that's why I say at the beginning, like, we don't have beef with Amway. We're not they didn't teach us anything. They just were the product, the real vehicle, or they even use the word, their vehicle to success. Right? Was Worldwide Millionaire University. They would say.
Oh, they would always say, like, would you shovel manure? Would you do this? Like. They're like, who cares if it's Amway? Like, we don't care it's Amway.
Exactly. Do you remember when I asked you?
Yeah,
I was telling you.
Yeah, we were sitting at the kitchen table, and you're like, "Would you rather like shovel manure to like be a millionaire, something like that?" And I was like, "I mean, yeah, I would do it in order to get there."
And they would ask you that analogy to see if you are process oriented or results oriented. They would say anybody who's results oriented will be willing to do whatever it takes,
right,
including being a part of
manure.
And the manure happened to be Worldwide Dream Builders and utilizing the Amway Avenue. But it has been an absolute pleasure. Having you here. Is there like, if you could, like, again, if anybody wants to be a part of Worldwide, like that's up to you. We're just sharing our experiences. But if there was one thing you would want people to know about Worldwide, what would it be?
It is actually a cult. Like, as much as they will tell you it is not a cult, it is 100% a cult.
Yeah.
And if you want to go into the process, watch like a Charles Manson documentary or Wild Wild Country, something about cult leaders. Like, read about stuff like that, and Worldwide uses the exact same tactics.
They do. So my stepmom was raised Mormon, and what's funny is her sister was a part of Worldwide when the top crown was a single and wasn't a diamond yet. That long ago. Yeah. Wow. So my stepmom was raised Mormon, and I would tell her all these things about the board plans and what we're saying, and she would say, I know, like, she's like, that sounds like the Latter-day Saints church. She's like, that sounds like Mormons. And she's no longer Mormon anymore. I mean, she still has respect for her family who are still Mormon. And just out of respect for her, I'll say, you know, I know it's not the whole religion that's bad, whatever. But absolutely, I believe that their cult-like environment is very much derived from these extremist churches and extremist cults. So I think
and they are not your friends.
They're not.
Thing. Like, literally, if you want to prove to them that they are not your friends, like, just don't make ditto for a month. Like,
exactly. All it takes is 1 month.
I can't make it this month. Money's tight. It's like, see how they react.
Absolutely. And don't go to a major function because you can't afford it, or you can't afford to drive wherever it is, or you can't afford the hotel stay because they make you stay in like 5-star hotels for Lord knows what freaking reason.
Yeah. I never did that. I was like, I'm going to Travelodge.
Yeah. They made us room together as singles at a 5-star hotel in Spokane for family reunion.
They had like the head hotel, like where everybody like was staying at or whatever. I would never do that. I was like, I am so cheap, like, surprisingly. I was like, no, I will stay at the Travelodge. It has a pool. I'm okay with that. That's all I want.
Right. Yeah, no, I think those are fantastic points. And we are so grateful for you to come here and speak your truth. And this is your rally, if you will.
I always wanted one, so I'm pretty happy.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And we would love to have you back. I'm awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for your time, Corey.
Thank you so much.
Where can they follow us?
You can follow us on TikTok and Instagram at xsnt_podcast. Or for our speak out sessions, you can also email us at xsnt.podcast@gmail.com.
Yes. If you have a story to share, please share it. We are always here. You can share as much or as little information as you want. You can be anonymous. We're just here to listen and give you a voice. So thanks, everybody.
Bye.